They weren't ready, they coming out.
I will officially call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of Coachella Valley Water District Board of Directors here in Coachella on April 26, 2022. I'd like to make clear for the record that this meeting is being conducted as permitted under AB 361 and Board Resolution 2021-43. Today's meeting is presented in a hybrid format in person at here in Coachella in Forbes Auditorium and also via Zoom. AB 361 suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act, allowing district board members to participate in person or via video conference. We'll be all in person today. Members of the public may participate in person or via Zoom. Zoom details are listed on the meeting agenda. The meeting is streamed live on the district's website and YouTube channel. Members of the public who wish to comment on any item on the agenda or within the jurisdiction of the district will have 3 minutes. Public comment may be provided in person, via Zoom, or by emailing the clerk of the board. Such comments will become part of the board meeting record. And if you're on Zoom, if you'd like to comment, please use the raise hand feature to get our attention. And I think that covers it. Good. Well, would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And roll call, please.
Good morning, President Powell,
Here.
Vice President Estrada,
Here.
Director Bianco will be absent, Director Aguilar,
Here.
and Director Nelson.
Here.
Thank you.
And Director Bianco might be joining us for the closed
For
session,
closed
so we'll
session.
make a note of that in the minutes if that's how it works out. Do we have any additions, deletions, or adjustments to the agenda?
I think Finance was asking about something, but I think we're okay. Yeah, they wanted to move one of the items from their section up to be more consistent with.
They wanted, so what it was is, we have the
Yeah.
public facilities at as 7A, and their finance department item is 8D, because they are now in alpha order, and so they wanted to move 7D up after
Right.
7A. So I don't see
Oh.
anybody from finance
not-
in the audience.
It's not absolutely necessary.
If they're not here, it doesn't really matter,
Okay.
right?
There's no changes to the agenda then, sir?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. Do we have anyone from the public wishing to make comment at this time?
So we do have 2 attendees. I just don't know if there's anybody on Zoom and you would like to provide public comment during the general public comment section, please use the raise hand feature. Again, if you're online and would like to provide general comment, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom.
Okay, well, if you see anyone, let me know. Consent calendar consists of items 5A through G.
Mr. President, I have a question on G, if I could pull that,
Yes,
please.
yes. Good one to pull.
And with that, I'd move the balance of the consent calendar for approval.
Second?
Good, well, you have a motion, and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed 4-0. With one absent. And so,
Hey, Elmer.
5G, this is the drainage.
Right. So I just had a question about
Elmer.
there was a comment in the staff report about the final calculation on the water fees having to wait until you get your final landscaping plans. So I'd like to can you just give us an overall update about where we are reviewing all of their plans and what's outstanding and what the timing is for those approvals?
So is this on?
Oh, it's off now. It was on. There we go.
Okay. The water and sewer
on-site improvement plans are almost done. We're close to routing that for final signature. And the landscape plans, they're still currently under review. We haven't had approved landscape plans, so therefore we haven't been able to calculate the total water that's going to be used by the landscape so that we could calculate the water supply backup facility charge and the water demand offset fee.
Okay, when do you think that will happen?
I don't, the landscape plans are reviewed by the water management group, and I don't think we have anyone representative on that, so.
I can get back to you with an answer on that.
Thank you, Scott, I appreciate that.
Essentially, they have to be submitted before we can review them, and they haven't been submitted yet as far
Yeah,
as.
I'll try to find the status.
They had one round of review, I believe, so there's a final update that needs to be done.
Okay, good, thank you, I appreciate the feedback. With that, I would move the item.
I'll second.
And any other discussion? I know this is one that there were a couple board members brought in on some of the concerns that Berger had. I imagine we're, again, I'm seeing nods. We're satisfying, or they're being satisfied, I guess, with their concerns. Good. Any other discussion before we vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed 4-0. Thanks, Elmer.
So, Mr. President, if we could skip over item 7A and maybe start on the action calendar. Our finance staff is in Palm Desert. They thought the meeting was in Palm Desert.
Yes, they're rushing here.
they're
as we
rushing
speak.
So
here.
that would explain why they're not here.
Correct.
So I guess there is a change to the agenda after all, sir.
Yeah. All right, we will hold 7A for later. To when
And all of this staff is saying, well, I got the memo.
Hey,
Which Sylvia, I do appreciate the
try and
the
send
late
you
email in the evening. It's just is a big help to me. Thank you.
Let them know that all the donuts are gone by the time they get here. Nothing left. So on to the action. 8A is, Armando, you have the bids for the sewer pipeline rehab, Palm Desert and Thousand Palms. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, President Powell, members of the board, audience, fellow staff. Just for the record, my name is Armando Rodriguez, Engineering Manager for CWD. And as stated, the purpose for this request is to seek authorization for solicitation of bids for construction of the sewer pipeline rehabilitation for Palm Desert, Thousand Palms. We anticipate to rehabilitate about 4,425 linear feet of pipe with these three areas within Palm Desert and also within Thousand Palms. If there's any specific questions, or I can continue with the presentation.
Go ahead.
Okay. The first site is along Highway 74, starting at Coahuila Drive, and what we're doing here is we're trying to rehabilitate ductile iron pipe. It has a liner, and with age, about more than 50 years, that liner tends to dilapidate. So we got to go in there and insert a CIPP, a cure-in-place pipe, basically recreating a pipe within this section. Also, within the Thousand Palms, we got close to 2,200 feet. Very aged pipe. It has a lot of cracks, and operations has identified this to be a concern. And then we recently also looked at the area which is the Jensen Shopping Center, which is San Pablo to Larkspur. And we got about 450 feet there that we got to rehabilitate again because of cracks that we have to address.
Armando, how do we discover these sections?
You know, Operations does a great job. They have a program that every 5 years or so, most of this sewer pipeline pipes within the ground gets surveyed, gets cleaned, gets washed, and then they come up with a priority list. And then, so there's hot spots. They know of these priority lists, so they go out and wash and treat and, in essence, babysit. And so they bring it to our attention, and then we develop a programs of trying to address the most severe spots. And then, so we go every year, we look at these severe spots, and then we say, okay, let's add them to the next budget cycle. So it is ongoing sewer habit. We're very blessed to be a relatively young sewer system. We don't have the $1 billion of rehab that some of, like LA County might have, that they do every year. We're limited to these types of programs at this type of threshold dollar value. But it is something that we do every year. We assess it with operations, and they bring it to our attention.
Good.
Armando, you said cleaning and surveying. Does the surveying include video of the lines, and that's why we know there are cracks?
Absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
I just find it interesting that, there's these long runs and only parts of them have the
Yeah,
problem.
it's very interesting. Which is key for us is great because we don't have to rehabilitate the whole run. We just got to look at segments and choosing picks, which are the severe ones.
Okay.
So as we said, this project is a multi-year project. We anticipate to spend some money this fiscal year, but the majority of the construction or total cost will be next fiscal year. So our staff recommendations to allow us to go out and solicit bids for this construction. This concludes my presentation.
Okay.
I'll take any further questions.
Thank you. Any other, I guess the only question I would have is, what if we don't do this project now? I guess there's risk that it'll fail at some point?
Yeah, I would highly recommend not take that approach because yes, there is a risk. These areas, as you can see, are heavily populated, and any SSO will be prime centered to the population group that is affected. We already know that there's cracks there, and we all know that we know that there's a sensitive hotspot that we got to address. So I highly recommend that we approve.
Okay, thank you.
Armando, I have some quick questions for clarification. When I look at the financial summary, am I right to assume that the projected cost was the 2.2 million? Was that what was budgeted, or was it?
Yeah, when we looked at this improvement, we estimated it to be 2.3 million. And we think we're going to be a little bit less than that, even though, yes, there is some inflationary pressures within the market, but as we look at the different CIPP groups, it's a very competitive market, and we think we can be right under that.
Okay, and then one more. Typically, we get a summary of the bids. Was this the only? I don't know if I was able to see it here, but was it just one bid, or?
This is just the authority for us to go
Okay.
solicit bids.
Okay.
We'll bring this staff report back.
Okay, I see that. Thank you.
It's an extra step that we added.
Yes.
David.
Appreciate that. All right, is there a motion to approve this?
Make a motion.
Second?
Okay, good, there's a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passed 4-0.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Armando.
Armando.
Good. On to USBR Mid-Canal Storage Project. Carrie Alflin, good morning.
Good morning. So this action item is to authorize the general manager to execute a second funding agreement for the Mid-Canal Storage Project with the United States Bureau of Reclamation. And as part of this agreement, it includes a $74,352 deposit payable to USBR. So they have reimbursable costs and non-reimbursable costs, and so these are the $74,000 are reimbursable costs, and they're to pay for staff time related to the NEPA compliance, cultural compliance, and management and administration of the project as we get it ready to go into construction. There's a non-reimbursable component of $64,680. Those costs will be paid by the USBR. And then I've summarized, all the different responsibilities between us and the Bureau. If you would like me to highlight any of those, I'm happy to, or if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have one.
Okay.
So, I just don't fully understand this conserved water determination, which states that CVWD agrees to bear the risk through a reduction in the amount of Colorado River water delivered to CVWD if the quantity of water conserved by the project decreases based on the Secretary's determination upon project completion. So, in other words, if it leaks, then we have to reduce our water order by the amount of the leak? Is that what it's saying?
Right. I think there's a certain amount that's allowed right now, and if this project changes that amount, then yes, we would have to adjust. But the first funding agreement that we had with the USBR was to pay them to do a seepage study, and we have the results of that seepage study, and it shows that with either using the existing clay that's already at the site or adding a clay liner up to 2.8 feet, the seepage will remain the same or be better.
And we are adding clay in a part?
Yes. Yeah, we're, as part of this next phase, before we final the project design, we're going to be doing some additional geotech work, soil samples and things like that, just to find out, where the clay
Yeah.
is, where the
But
sand layers
I
are.
imagine that I didn't read that detailed into the actual agreement. Is there a cure provision? I mean, if they say you're seeping more than you should, do we have the opportunity to cure that so that we don't lose the water?
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah. But there's a lot of confidence in the design that with the addition of this clay, actually, there was a study done, or I believe it was Dahl, that showed that the clay liner actually reduces the seepage more than the concrete. So.
And we get to keep that, whatever's saved in that respect.
Well, it just means nothing. The agreements wouldn't change. Any of the
Right,
water allocations, they wouldn't change.
Right, it would
Yeah.
stay in, but it would stay in the canal
Right.
instead of.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I can just give you an update where we're at. We had a 70% design workshop last month. We're working to complete the environmental, which we are trying to complete by this fall. We completed the seepage study with the Bureau, like I talked about. Currently, the design, the first phase, and the environmental is being paid by the three parties: San Diego County Water Authority, us, and San Luis Rey Indian Tribe. We agreed once the design is complete, then the three of us will meet again and negotiate a second funding agreement for the construction of the project. We've applied for a loan through the USBR for the project. And the San Luis Rey Tribe is also trying to secure funding through the Bureau of Indian Affairs for their portion. So the construction right now, if everything goes smoothly and all the parties agree to move forward with the construction, would take place next fall timeframe.
Okay.
Yeah, not this fall, but next fall.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions?
And it's not planned to shut down, sorry.
Yeah.
Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead, that was
Yeah,
my.
so we're not planning on shutting down.
Is that what you're saying?
So, the overall cost, what do we think the overall cost will be? in the final
Well, the
analysis?
overall cost was about $7.5 million, but we are updating that cost estimate because of the increase in fuel prices.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still trying to finalize that.
Okay.
But it's probably gone up maybe 300 to 500,000.
Right, so let's say 8 million.
Yeah.
And then what's the percentage breakdown between the tribe? San Diego and Coachella?
I was gonna look that up this morning. Off the top of my head,
You should have followed your instincts.
I know. Off the top of my head, it was San Diego was around 60%. CBWD was around 25, and San Luis Rey was the remainder, like 11 or 13.
62.5, 12.5, 25.
Okay, I was close.
62 and a half, 12 and
12
a
and a
half?
half and 25.
Oh, okay.
God bless Dan Charlton.
Remembers those numbers.
And then, so what's the anticipated savings of water on an annual basis? Hard to pin down? Hard to pin down, right?
It has the ability to store 728 acre feet.
Hey, Dan, we won't capture you on audio.
I'll
have to
repeat
come
that.
on.
So so the reservoir is designed to contain 728 acre feet
Okay.
So
between this 5-mile section.
operationally, it could save a lot of water
Yeah,
depending on
over
how
the
the
over
wa-
time, right?
If there's
Yeah.
more than one storm or a frost event.
So is that quantified in some way, and then the water is delivered to the 3 entities, or is it just Coachella's water?
No, we haven't quantified it in any way, so
All right.
it would just be our water.
And the main purpose, though, is to help save those panels, right? I mean, that's
Right. Well, it's to save costs of doing the panel repairs, but it also allows us a lot more operational flexibility. So that, because right now we're restricted to how far we can bring the water down over a certain period of time. And so now having this larger area, it gives us that ability to either save the water or use the water when we need it.
Because the 2 other funding partners see this as a operational.
They an OM&R savings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
panels.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
they have to participate in paying for the replacement of the cracked panels, and
Yep.
in this section, about 50% of the cracks happen in this section.
Fantastic. Okay, great.
Okay.
So are we waiting for approval of the loan before we can proceed?
Um,
I mean, how far can you get without,
Well, right now, we're just doing the design and environmental, and we are supposed to find out about the loan, I think, in May. And then that would, so it's not affecting the construction process right now. We still have to negotiate the agreement with San Diego and the tribe to proceed with the construction, so we're okay.
Thanks.
All right. Is there a motion to approve
Yeah,
this?
I'd move approval of this item.
second?
Okay, there's a motion and a second. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed 4-0. Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks, Gary.
8C, I see Zoe moving forward. You missed the donuts. Good morning.
Thanks for coming down, though.
Yeah. Morning, Zoe. All right, go ahead. This is 8C.
Yes, so good morning, President Powell, members of the board. The action item before you today is to present and for the board to accept the fiscal year 2022-2023 engineer's report on water supply and replenishment assessment. This is required by State Water Code 31631, and the engineer's report for this year provides updated groundwater conditions for each of the designated areas of benefit based on the SGMA annual reports that were already presented to the board earlier this year. It also, as required, updates production and replenishment data, the income statements for fiscal year 2022-2023, and provides the recommended replenishment assessment charges to be levied for the next fiscal year. If the board wishes, I can go through the presentation If the board wishes, I can go through the presentation and talk about production levels, groundwater levels. As I mentioned, we presented groundwater conditions earlier this year, or I could turn it over to finance to move forward and turn it over to finance to talk about the recommended replenishment assessment charges.
I personally would like to have you go over the groundwater information,
Go.
particularly in the west.
Go ahead.
Excellent. So for the Mission Creek Subbasin Area of Benefit for calendar year 2021, production was 4,582 acre feet in the CVWD area, in DWA about 9,600, for a total of 14,207. No water was delivered to the Mission Creek facility the last calendar year. In terms of groundwater levels in the Mission Creek Subbasin, most of the subbasin had very stable levels, no changes. There were some declines near the replenishment facility because we've had 2 low years back-to-back of State Water Project, so those groundwater levels near the facility have begun to decline somewhat. When we look at the longer term, however, most of the subbasin has experienced increases in water levels. And we see that here as well with selected hydrographs throughout the area of benefit. In blue, you see replenishment amounts going back to 2010 and the response of the wells near the replenishment facility. The remaining wells are within our area of benefit where we've seen very, very stable water levels. Moving on to the West Whitewater River Subbasin area of benefit. Production in our area was 122,413 acre feet. DWA just above 36,000 for a total of 159,245. Replenishment in the West Whitewater River and Palm Desert groundwater replenishment facilities combined was 25,639. You'll notice this is lower than our average, and that was due to reduced replenishment at the Whitewater facility. In fact, at the Palm Desert, we hit higher amount than we previously had in calendar year 2021. In terms of groundwater levels, if you look at the 1-year change, there were increases further down gradient in the West Whitewater River Subbasin area of benefit, but declines in the replenishment facility. Recall we had 2017, 2018, a lot, record replenishment, in fact, in 2017. So as we've gone to lower State Water Project allocation, those levels are declining.
Sorry, can you go back?
Absolutely.
So, sometimes I get confused by these maps. So, in the westernmost area where you're showing the red and the orange areas that are showing depletion, and then you're showing the corresponding chart where you say -10 to -5, -20 to -10. Can you explain that to me?
So the way that this map is created is we look at water levels, and this was a change this year, so I'll explain that as well. Well, this is the 1 year, so let me explain that first. So we take wells where we have readings in water year 2020 and in water year 2021. We calculate the difference and then create this surface of changes. So that way we can explain what the changes are throughout the subbasin as opposed to individual wells. So yes, anything in green increases greater than 10 feet. The light green is 5 to 10, and then so on and so forth. So you are looking at everything that's orange to red. Those are declines, and you see those declines in the upper part. And then as you move down gradient where there's been increased conservation, the effects of those big replenishment activities in 2017, 2018, et cetera, those groundwater levels have gone up. Does that address your question?
Yes.
Okay. So looking at the longer term, and this is where I was mentioning that we've changed. We used to do 10 years with the new alternative plan updates, where one of DWR's recommendation was that we have metrics of sustainability. We're now comparing them to historical lows in 2009. So as you can see here, with the exception of one anomalous well, there have been increases throughout the entire area of benefit.
So,
What-
so we're comparing those then to the minimum thresholds, is that?
Yes, and because this is the engineer's report, I didn't point this out here or in these graphics, but the minimum thresholds are checked on an annual basis at the designated key wells, of which there are 57. Here, we're showing the surface, the changes at all of the wells that we measure. And of course, we have 57 key wells, and throughout the entire Indio Sub-Basin, all of the agencies collaboratively measure over 300 wells.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the minimum threshold are only attributable to those 57 wells? And-
Correct.
And this report is using all the wells?
Correct.
As a comparison, okay.
That is correct, and we show the contours of changes relative to that base year, which is 2009.
Yeah, okay.
But to create those contours, we use all of the wells.
Perfect.
For Sigma,
makes
comparisons will be at the key wells.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, thanks.
So this has a little more data in it.
Yeah.
That one spot there over on the northeast that's red, do we know what that is? What happened there?
I cannot, off of memory, tell you exactly who owns that well, but what I can tell you is we've checked that, and there's no reason to believe that that data is not valid for whatever reason when compared to readings in 2009, the levels there have actually declined. So it is a valid data point,
great.
but it is really an outlier when compared. And there aren't enough wells in that particular area to inform the contours. So you're seeing an area of decline that's very much driven by a single well.
Yeah, I mean, right. The ones pretty close to it in the light green, aren't nearly as
Dramatic in terms
yeah.
of,
Even if you knew who the owner of their private well was, you probably couldn't tell us in public session.
and that is correct.
No, yeah, but it's just curious. You wonder if the 2009 data point was no good. But who knows?
No, we did go back and look at the trends, and there was no reason to believe that that particular reading was.
Yeah.
How does that
something-
area look in the 1 year? Could you go back one slide?
Yeah, it's not nearly as bad. It's got
Kinda
some
neutral.
yellow. Yeah.
But what I can tell you is that for the 10 years, for the last 3 years that I've presented here, that well has been kind of a standout in the same fashion as now, because it did have these trends back then of having, higher groundwater levels, lower now.
Okay. Well, overall, things look really good.
Correct.
Zoe, going back to slide number 7, did you mention that you have here a figure of 25,000 acre-feet of water that was delivered between the West Whitewater River and the Palm Desert Replenishment Facility? Do you have the number of what went where? And did you mention the 1 year always, is the 1 year for the most part always going to look the way it looks now, just, in red, just because of the fluctuation of those deliveries?
Correct. So table 4.2 of the engineer's report shows Whitewater received just a pinch over 15,000 acre-feet in calendar year 2021, and Palm Desert 10,633. If you look at previous years going back to 2017, 385,994, 2018, 129,725, 2019, 243,000, and 2020, 136,000 total. So with regards to Whitewater, the majority of that water was there or replenished at that facility. So it's a big change compared to the last 4 years that only 15,000 acre-feet went into the ground.
Yeah.
So that explains that those decreases as that mound of 4 continuous years of high replenishment begins to dissipate.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
The only reason we have 15,000 delivered to Whitewater is because the board authorized that change, point of delivery from the East Valley. It's the deal we made with Metropolitan.
So selected hydrographs for the area, similar to the Mission Creek. You see replenishment in the blue bars, and it illustrates how we have those periods of high deliveries, and during drier periods, much lower delivery. The yellow line shows the response of at the wells nearest to the Whitewater replenishment facility, with the remaining wells, selected wells showing either increases in water levels over the last decade or very stable water levels. And for the East Whitewater River Subbasin area of benefit, production was 119,700 acre feet, with 37,971 acre feet delivered at the Thomas E. Levy facility. Over the last year, so just comparing the 1 year change, water levels declined slightly throughout most of the subbasin in the range of up to 5 feet. There was increased production in the calendar year. I believe it was about 3% increase. And so where we are with Thomas E. Levy is where, you know, when you look at groundwater levels, we're in a really good balance in terms of the amount of water being put in and the extractions, but the 1 year does show those decreases. When you look at the longer term change, the levels, you know, of course, have increased tremendously since full operation began at Thomas E. Levy, as well as all of the projects that reduce inlet replenishment, that reduce pumping over the years as canal water was provided for golf courses, et cetera.
Yeah, that slide 13 is pretty impressive.
And then again, selected hydrographs, those that show that steep increase near year 2010. Remember, the facility began operating or began full operation in 2009. Those are wells that are nearer to the facility and really showed a very marked response to replenishment activities. But the impact carries out throughout the area of benefit, with selected wells being shown here, either having increases or decreases were arrested, and everything is very stable. So any questions about replenishment, production, groundwater conditions? If not, then I will turn it over to finance to talk about the recommended replenishment assessments for each of the areas of benefit.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Hi, Karen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Good morning. So we're here to present the rates, the proposed rates for the replenishment funds. So the first slide that you see right there is the Mission Creek. So at this point, the total expenses and revenues have not changed. The projections still about remain the same as when we did the cost of service. So we are proposing to keep, there has been no rate increase proposed for Mission Creek. So we are going to keep it the same. So if there's no questions, I'll move on to the next fund. Okay. So this is the West Whitewater replenishment fund. So this slide right here is a snapshot of the total revenue projections and the total expenses for fiscal year 2023. So there has been an adjustment based on when we did the cost of service last year, it was based on a 2020 actuals. So as we go each year, we update the projections to update the base on that one as to the most current information. So this is based on a fiscal year 2021 a forecast. So I will actually go to the next slide because I think it gives a better picture of what we're proposing for West Whitewater. So this slide right here shows what the rate comparison is on the prop as approved on Prop 218, and then what we're proposing. So based on updated forecasts, we are proposing to decrease the rate increase from 20% to 19%. So as we know, the primary driver on the cost of service for West Whitewater was the transfer of the State Water Project costs to West Whitewater and also the CIP at that time, last year. So what has changed from that forecast is the biggest driver is, again, the water purchase. So we saw it last year where there's a change. The water purchase is one of the most hard to predict. Sometimes it can swing from one way to another each year. So this year, this upcoming year, the Rosedale Rio Bravo is estimated not to be delivered in fiscal year 2023. So that has changed the water expenses. But at the same time, we are then proposing to change that and transition that a water purchase and pay off the debt between domestic and West to help out the domestic fund. So as we know, we have the Mid-Valley Pipeline debt that we need to repay. So we had transitioned it, instead of removing that water purchase decrease, we have moved that water purchase to repay domestic fund.
And how much is that? Is that approximately?
So what we owe?
No, what, the amount for the Rosedale Rio Bravo that you're applying to the domestic loan?
It's about $7.5 million, and we're transitioning $7 million to pay back domestic for the principal.
And then what would be the remaining balance?
So right now, to date, we owe the West owes domestics $51.6 million in principal. Apologize. So another change. So I kind of want to go through some of the factors that changed from the forecast to what it is now. So part of it is the biggest change again for the expenses is really just moving that expense. The water purchase moved down. We're paying back the debt service. Another one that we have changed is the use of supplemental water charge for our CIP. So originally we had estimated $11.4 million for the Palm Desert, and we were able to use about some money from supplemental charge to pay off for that as well. So every year we kind of go through and make sure that we are in line with what we had projected. So we were able to decrease the proposed rate increase for fiscal year 2023. And we're going to go through this process each year. So if you look at the graph on the side that says the projected reserve balances and the policy reserve balances, this is just a quick snapshot of what we're estimating. So when we look at financial stability, we try to look at the long terms because each year it has an impact on the future years. So although you can see that there's the gap between the projected reserve and the policy reserve is what we use as pay-go funds. So as you can see, it kind of dips down. Our projected reserve dips down in the future years, and then we catch up back up on the 2027. So the decision is to keep, our proposal is to keep the proposed rate for 2023 and then to catch up on 2027 to maintain that, that pay-go funds in the future. So that's a snapshot of so we're proposing a decrease of the proposed rate to 196.79 to 198. I don't know if you have additional questions before I go on to the east.
So I do have some questions and maybe some comments. So I know that this 19% increase is substantially lower than what we were originally talking about. So I appreciate all the work that was done to make that happen. It still seems to me, compared to the East AOB and Mission Creek, that this 19% increase is carrying a disproportionately higher burden of cost than other areas of benefit. So my question to you is, what happens if we go with an increase that's less than 19%?
So it will for the change would be about 200 to 300 per projected reserve. So it will dip down so that at the end of 2027, if you can see, it's only 18.8 and 16.2. So that's only a 2 million pay-go funds. So if we dip lower than 19.5, we're not going to be able to meet our target by fiscal year 2027.
So this is only a one-year increase.
A one-year
So
increase.
And there are likely to be increases for the remaining 4 years
Yes.
if we stay under our maximum allocation.
Yes, so each year, we're always going to go through this process and determine if it's still appropriate. We're always looking at least, we look longer, but at the minimum, to meet policy, we have to look at least 5 years ahead of the impact, because it always has an impact. It will carry over those many years. So anything lower than 19 and a half, we will not be able to meet our target in 2027. It will push it out even further. to
The other
meet
thing to
target.
remember is that, we are now heavily reliant upon grants and loans from other funding agencies, and we're also selling bonds out to the public. So our overall financial condition is now much more suspect or much more considered as we go out. We used to be PAYGO, and we don't have those funds to do the projects anymore, so we have to go take on debt. And in order to take on debt and get favorable rates, we have to have some consistency in doing what we said we were going to do.
I think one of the issues, Director Aguilar, is also the state water project costs that I think are embedded into this fund.
Correct.
And, we've wrestled with that over the years, because that, the tax to pay for those costs is collected on the entire valley, including the east area of benefit. And yet, we are unable, it seems, to move that water to the Tommy C. Levy facility. So we've wrestled with that over the years and decided that we would keep the water from the state water project in the west area of benefit, but we would also keep the costs there. Another thing that we did to try to alleviate the financial burden was increase that tax, which increased the tax on the entire valley, not just the west area of benefit. And as Jim mentioned, it carries a tremendous amount of CIP for the Mid-Valley Pipeline, for a number of non-potable projects to connect golf courses. We're even seeing here, we're helping even more, I think, by moving some of that supplemental water supply charge to offset some of that financial burden that I think would come out of higher rate increases. But it's an area that we've been kind of wrestling with for a while.
I know. I just think that, I think, we've done all the work that we can to get to this point. It seems like, I think sometimes, in fact, I recall somebody making the comment that these costs can just be absorbed within the user's operations, whether it's a golf course or a commercial user, and that's just not always the case. So, we're asking for conservation measures, and they're probably going to get more extreme, and now we're giving them almost 20% increase, and I understand all that. I just think that, there's going to be some pain involved with this, and that concerns me. So, but I think all my questions for the moment have been answered, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just piggyback on that, because I was actually, my thinking was along the same lines, kind of, thinking about how there's projects that are being proposed now. There's projects that are going to continue to be proposed. I think we saw some changes in this supplemental water supply charge. I forget, I think we're calling it a different term now, but the mechanism is a bit different on how we collect it. And, when I think about that in the long term, and understanding that, there's, when we look at the west area of benefit, the east area of benefit, a lot of the development's going to continue to occur in the east area of benefit. So that's going to generate perhaps revenue on that fund. And right now, a lot of the projects are in the west area of benefit. I know we're going after loans and grants and et cetera, et cetera. But there's a big financial need to execute those projects. And so I don't know if I made these comments when we were looking at the new breakdown on how we were going to collect that fund, those revenues for the different projects that are coming in across the valley. But one of the things that I kind of get concerned about is getting to a point where we start having projects in the east side, the same type of projects that we're implementing in the west side as it relates to Purple Pipe, perhaps, turning that Ward 4 into recycled water and then building all the infrastructure for it. And then getting to a place where perhaps those funds have all been earmarked. And so now we have a need to tack on those new, those needed revenues to build those projects on the East Rack. When perhaps a big percentage of the money that was gathered because of the projects, has been earmarked for other projects somewhere else. So I think it's important for us to, I don't know if we're doing it, but to keep at least for information purposes, so that in the future, if a board member asks, hey, can we get a sense of, when we look at the totality of these funds, where do they come from? I don't know that we're doing that right now, but I would like to have a sense of, in the 5-year, 10-year, projection of projects coming on, projects developing, what's contributing to that fund that then we're going to spread over projects that fund can sustain, and where is it going? Otherwise, because we have to find the money for it, and it's either gonna come out of the replenishment funds, or it's gonna come out of this supplemental water supply charge. So those are just general comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go on to the next fund, if that's okay. Okay. So for the East Whitewater Fund, so again, this is a snapshot of what the projected revenues and expenses are in the cash flow. So there is a slight decrease on the revenue, because again, we did adjust it a little bit for in anticipation of the drought. So again, I'll go to the next slide because I think it shows a better picture. So we are proposing a decrease in the proposed rate by about from 9.5% to 8.5%. So that's a total net effect of 73 cents per acre foot change. So from 79.14 to 78.41. Once again, you can see again, if you look at the projected reserve balances, the difference between the projected reserve and the assigned reserve is that PAYGO fund as well. And you can see it's very close in fiscal year 2023 with our PAYGO funds. And what Jim has stated, we have a bond. We issued a bond out of East for the Oasis project. And so it's very important for us to maintain a positive cash flow, a positive reserve. So we are debt covenants that we have to comply with as well. And again, each year we're going to look at this fund, and we're going to make sure that we are meeting those targets, and at the same time we're presenting reasonable increases or revenues to support. And to kind of add on to Director Estrada's concern, we do take a look at the funding sources. We try to present that during our quarterly and our annual budget to actual, and I think Carrie touched upon the funding sources as well, but we will be more conscious about focusing on that, so that we're prepared to answer where those funding sources are, to make sure that we have the sufficient funds, and you clearly stated to you where it's coming from. And again, for this one, it's if you have specific questions for the East Whitewater, but hasn't been that significant change as well.
Just a quick question, Carrie. When is the schedule for the Prop 218 end?
It's up to for fiscal year 2026. I'm sorry, but did I misunderstand your question?
Yeah.
It goes up to 26?
26, yes.
Those rates are already set. That shows that first
Okay.
line.
So for
it seems-
2027.
Those are the maximum rate.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maximum rate, yeah.
Are we that new into the schedule? I feel like we've been in
This
the
is our
schedule.
second year.
Okay,
Second
I'm
year
sorry.
in the
I
prop.
felt like we were like in the third.
yeah.
Groundhog Day.
year.
I mean, I know it's a couple years away, but I imagine
Yeah.
we'll have some questions
Sure.
when we do the rate setting for 25, because it looks like the reserves are going to grow beyond what's required.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
We don't need to do that today.
So if there's no other questions, then I'll turn it back to Zoe to wrap up the presentation.
So again, the recommended action today is for the board to acknowledge receipt of the fiscal year 2022-2023 engineers report. We will be coming back to the board on May 10th for authorization to mail state water code notices and do a newspaper publication with these proposed rates. But today, the only action being taken is to accept the engineers report.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd move approval of the engineers report.
I'll second it. And I think, you know, the sort of the takeaway, that at least my takeaway of this, is that the program is working. That we're seeing especially on those 10-year, 10 or 11-year slides, we're seeing the benefits of the replenishment efforts. All right, there's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Pass 4-0. Thanks.
Yeah, I see a lot of other red areas around the state.
Oh. You know, I haven't
And
really
so-
looked, but I imagine. I
Oh
mean,
my
if guys
gosh,
are
John.
dropping wells down like they are,
No,
I've heard.
and it's usually subsidence maps, not water level maps.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. All right, so we're on to this finance item. Should we go back and do 7A now and then do 8D?
That would be my recommendation.
Yes, and then we recommend to formally open being as a public facilities corporation.
Yeah, of course. So at this time, the board will recess as the CBWD Board of Directors and convene as the Public Facilities Corporation. And we have one item to take up as the Public Facilities Corporation, which is approval and adoption of the resolution and agreements related to the Certificate of Participation Series 2022 for the North Indio Regional Flood Control Project Phase 2. Hi, Carrie.
So this one is to seek approval for the board. Sorry. So this is to seek approval for the Facilities Corporation to approve the resolution and the agreements related to the sale of the COP Series 2022 for the North India Flood Control Project. On the line, we do have our bond counsel, Doug Brown from Stradling. He can go over the different agreements that needs to be approved. And we also have Darren Hodge from PFM, if you have any specific questions on the bond. But as you can see on the agenda report, it does provide us the TIC of 3.7 for this bond that we're issuing, with an estimated total debt service of $101 million. We are on schedule to go on sale on May 5th. So they are on the line if you have any specific questions.
And just to remind the board, we have addressed this issue project funding arrangement at least 2, if not 3 times already. So this just kind of finalizes the action and allows us to move forward with the sale of the bonds.
Right.
I'll move the approval of the item.
I'll second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second to approve the item. Just looking for something. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed 4-0. Thank you. And so that this time we'll recess as the Public Facilities Corporation and reconvene as the CBWD Board of Directors. And that takes us to item 8D. Go ahead.
So it's the same. So this one is the same documents. It's just approving it on the district side. So if you have any, thank you.
I'll second.
Second, I'm just looking for one thing. So on, you see this? There's a, Jim, check it out.
Exhibit F,
Exhibit F of the,
a little bit of a typo.
it's the goof faith estimate. You might want to change that. It's on the the resolution COP.
I will make sure it's updated before
Yeah,
we sign.
it's, I think it's supposed to say good faith instead of
Yes.
goof faith. Yeah.
We'll make sure it's changed.
I don't know, is that intentional?
You're just trying to see if we're reading these things. So we have a motion and a second. Did I hear the second? Yeah, okay, good. All in favor, say aye.
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 That passed 4-0.
Thank you.
Gotta find those things. Informational, we have 9A, written communications. I'm sure we've all noticed quite a few commenters on the surf parks and Cotino. People are expressing a bit of consternation about that.
Actually, and I guess Cotino is having their groundbreaking at some point today.
Today,
The morning news was not specific as to the time of the event,
Mm-hmm.
but that'll be kicking off. And I guess tonight, the La Quinta Planning Commission is also scheduled to hear the Coral Mountain Project.
Again.
Yes, again.
A continuance of
A continuance, correct. I'm not sure whether that will be voted to move forward or recommended to move forward to
Yeah.
the city council. They
It-
really just make a recommendation.
Do you know if that's like a Zoom or YouTube or?
I do not, but we can probably figure that out and let you know, sir.
Could you?
It is on,
It is?
Yeah, we've been watching it in the evening.
Oh, okay.
so even though one of my staff members is not currently mic'd, they did confirm that it will be available on YouTube this evening. That would be the La Quinta Planning Commission hearing.
If you could send me the link, I'd appreciate it.
Hi, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we've been responsive. I mean, I think the gist of the response is that while we're not necessarily the land planning agency that decides whether these projects are approved or not, we do have our water management plans and a variety of different documents that are available on our website. So if people want to see, I mean, even today's
Even this water
these,
assessment.
yeah,
plan.
the engineers' reports today that show where we are and with the groundwater. And frankly, when you look at the 10-year, 10 or 11-year well levels, they look very good, very positive. I mean, again, the takeaway is that our water management and replenishment programs are working, and that there's a very healthy aquifer that is in better shape today than it was 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
Or
And-
11 or 12 years ago. So one of them was going back to 2009, so.
Yeah, I asked Scott Burrett to come forward. He's been handling all of the communications with both the media and the residents, the ratepayers, whether they're ratepayers or not, sometimes hard for us to determine. But there has been a lot of concern, and as President Powell has said, our job is basically to assure that the water supply is available for development, not necessarily to make the value judgment of how that water is used. So, but Scott, if you want to give the board a sense of how busy your days have been?
They've been pretty busy, but unfortunately, we can, what we started doing is providing the water supply assessment fact sheet, which is on our website, because we were finding that our message wasn't getting out there, so we could provide this information, but the soundbite that, would make it onto the news or, in the paper would be, not about the healthy aquifer. It would be, we have plenty of water, which steps on the conservation message. So, our approach has been to refer individuals to the water supply assessment fact sheet, FAQ sheet, and any concerns about the actual approval of this project, we've been referring to the La Quinta City Planning Commission.
Right, and that's fair.
And Sylvia just sent to the board members an invite to that meeting this evening.
Yeah, I
It
just
has
got it,
the,
thanks.
connection.
Might want to put a pot of coffee on if you're going to watch that one.
Yeah, I have a meeting from 5 to 6, so I think after 6.
Yeah,
I'll-
you won't miss much.
I think I'll get a glass of wine.
Yeah,
Here you
go
go.
ahead.
I'll be right there with you. So Scott, so I think, thank you for updating us on this. I think the pushback that I'm hearing on the argument that the aquifer is sufficient and that, that will address the issue, and we don't have land use control over these projects, is that people really don't understand that the water assessment process that we go through is rooted in a pretty fundamental sort of scientific process that is not flawed. So, because I think the fact sheet is good as far as it goes, and, you know, there's a lot of information there, but I think it's, I don't know if there's a way for us to simplify that or send the message out that water assessment process is really validated somehow, and that it's not just some numbers that we make up based on data that we generate, that there are other influencing partners in how we determine those numbers. So otherwise, it sounds as though we're just sort of creating our own argument. So I just want to make that point, because that's the argument that I use, and then pushback I get is, well, you know, it's your own water assessment process, and so, you know, how valid is that?
But I mean, it is a valid process, as Zoe, you know, Zoe's presentation pointed out today that, you know, there's an exhaustive amount of research and effort that goes into complying with all these annual updates, the engineer's report, and the water management plans, and there's collaboration across the Coachella Valley with the other water agencies. So
I think the fear is that, you know, the drought is going to get worse, and that we're going to be, we're looking at the imposition of probably more drastic measures, and so the two are hard for people to, I think, get in their heads. So I think what we're doing is really important, and continue to put that message out.
And I think in the long term, our conservation message is important for customers to adhere to, you know, and to push for conservation, because our long-term water management plan relies on conservation. Much of the Coachella Valley and our service area was developed before landscape ordinances and before irrigation practices were regulated by state law and our own ordinances. And so there's a lot of places out there that are wall-to-wall turf. And as customers conserve and reduce to desert landscaping or move towards desert landscaping, you know, this frees up water for, there will always be new projects. People, the next generation needs a home, will need homes, and they'll need water, and I think our water management plans make all of these things possible.
Yep. Conservation is one of the many strategies. Right, we have a variety of strategies that recycling, importing, that when all done together as part of the plan, make it all possible.
Right.
So it's not one or the other. It's everything.
Everything.
Yeah. Good, Scott. Thank you.
Okay.
How did I end up here? I'm getting so many windows open now. I'm losing control of my screen here.
10B, board requests future agenda items.
Here we go. No, I'm back. I found it. I had all my tabs got so small I couldn't. Still getting used to the new system. So board general comments. Why don't we start with Director Nelson?
Okay, great. At the start of the meeting, I forwarded on to all the directors, and the staff had that, but it's the 7 basin states' response to Assistant Secretary Trujillo's request that the 7 states as a whole, look at 2 operations that might be considered as part of their response to critically low lake levels at Lake Mead. That endangers future electrical production and infrastructure. And so we, on Friday, the 20th or 21st, we released that letter. And it really is not objecting to and supporting to work through the issues of their proposal to under DROA conditions of the 2019 Drought Contingency Plan to release up to 500,000 acre feet of water out of Flaming Gorge Reservoir and put it into Lake Powell. And then the other proposal was to reduce the release from Lake Powell to Lake Mead from 7.48 million acre feet to 7 million acre feet. Effectively, what that does is reduces at the end of the year Lake Mead level by 7 feet. And we've been working for some time, and I have a number of reports that I'll just generalize in that, since this is kind of the summation of those reports. But we're continuing to work on other measures as well. We're working on how to account for that reduction of water movement from Powell to Mead, how to account for it, how to, at some point, get that water back into Lake Mead. And so it appears that there's a process by which we can make tier determinations for the 2023 annual operating plan. By the Bureau would consider that water had been delivered. So there's no immediate cutbacks to the lower basin states.
So they would just add the 7 feet back?
Exactly, yeah.
As if it were there?
As if it were there.
Interesting.
So I imagine that in the next year or so, we're going to continue to work on how to manage the reservoirs and keep energy production. Water is still number one priority, but these are actions that can be taken to ensure that for the next year that there's energy production out of Lake Powell. So that's been released, and we're working on those issues.
Did that Sierra storm, that was a pretty nice storm, did it make it over to the Colorado River Basin?
It did, and it's not a drought buster, but it does improve conditions both in California and the Colorado River Basin. So I think there were reports at the Snow Level Observatory of another 20 to 30 inches of snow in the Sierras, which is fantastic. Yeah, it's helpful, and I think the 24-month study will show, in April, I think it may even be out, but in April and May, will show some improvement in that. So that's very positive news. Okay.
Yeah, I think they were saying California's now snow water equivalent is something like 68% or something like that.
Right. So
which is better than it was.
Better than it was.
Still low.
Yeah.
Awesome April.
Awesome April.
We need a little more of April.
Yeah, if we can get a little more of that.
Okay, good.
And temperatures stay cool. So that's a development on the river that everyone's been working hard on. The other thing is, I was asked if Coachella was going to be either endorsing or looking at the Family Farm Alliance principles paper that has to do with their Colorado River Basin outlook. And that was emailed to us through the Farm Alliance, and they have 8 principles. So I guess I'll refer that off to the staff and see if that's something that we want to sign on to. They're very supportive of agriculture in the basin as we move through the 2026 guideline renegotiations. And we may or may not want to endorse as a board, but I was asked if we were going to do that, so I thought I'd bring it up at this time.
Thank you. Yeah, that might have been circulated. I don't remember it. I don't think I looked at it if it did.
Yeah,
so.
I'll send it. I have it up on
again.
my screen right now, and
Yeah, I'd
I'll
like
send
to
it
look.
to Jim.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, thanks. I sometimes get something from them.
There we go.
Yeah. The problem is you get so much stuff, you don't know which
Oh,
ones are important.
there's so much to read.
They get deleted before they. All right. Director Aguilar.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that while I was away last week, that there was a neighborhood community meeting that was held in the Panorama neighborhood in Cathedral City, and because I was away and I could not attend, Scott and Diego Colorado attended. to answer questions about the potential sewer project. This was sponsored by Councilwoman Ross, I believe it was her district, and she was there. And it was important because we need to start the communication effort with respect to the neighborhood to get them to embrace the project. And I think it was a great kickoff. There's another meeting on the 7th, which I will attend to help with that. But the feedback I got was really positive, and that there were a lot of questions at the end of the meeting, and a lot of them were in Spanish, and so it was great that Diego was there. I mean, you may speak Spanish, Scott, I don't know, but, so.
Come on, you do everything else, Scott.
Yeah, just add
He's
that to
working
your
on it.
item. So I really appreciate that, and it was a great effort, so, thank you.
Good to hear. Director Estrada?
I just have one comment, suggestion. It seems like the Chromium 6 is starting to pick up some momentum. There's been a number of workshops. There's, comment letters that are due soon. I know staff has been working on it, and they're on top of it. But it might be good for staff to give the entire board an informational on the subject. Where are we at? What do the schedules look like in terms of when they're going to if they said they're going to make a determination by some time. Just an update. I think, where we're at right now, if they bring it back at the 10 parts per billion, what does that mean for us financially? And it might be good for the board to just start thinking about, what does that mean for us? We still have the same issue. I imagine we would still need to treat the same number of wells, around 30-some wells. We've provided some cost calculations to the board. I think we're thinking 400 million now, and so those are big numbers. And I don't know if they're gonna, if that's gonna change in terms of. I think they've made a comment about they would potentially look into allowing the stannous chloride technology, but they would want more information. So it looks like they're still pushing for the strong anion exchange treatment, which is what we went out to bid last time. So
Almost, went out to bid, almost some.
almost. We almost signed, but it went out. So we're sharing all that with the board. That Steve Bigley's doing a good job keeping in contact with them, but I think it might be good for you, Steve, to give us an update.
Your department report today.
Okay, perfect.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Scary.
See how flexible they are? So responsive, so flexible.
You're going to talk about that during your meeting report?
Sure, I could mention it.
Giant piece of glass.
Yeah, I could throw that somewhere. Don't do that.
Not really. I guess I don't really have any comments. I need to talk to somebody about my iPad and that PrimeGov. It didn't work the way it was supposed to. I was able to do the PrimeGov on the
I can try and set it up.
computer.
If I can't, I'll ask IT.
It would come up and I'd click on stuff and nothing would happen. It's weird.
I can take a look at that.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be sitting here during. Okay. We have a standing agenda item for board member request for future agenda items. If there are any, just speak up. Don't hear any. Let's get into the meetings. March 24th, Salton Sea Authority, Director Estrada. Why don't you just run through them? You have some catching up, Director Estrada. You got about
Yeah, I was there. Just a regular meeting. Updates on projects, number of presentations. I don't remember anything in specific that was, that kind of bounces out at me, but I was there. The joint press conference with the congressman, that was an event that happened back in March 25th. That was, we did it on a Friday. Staff was very helpful. Thank you for doing that. It was really a joint press conference with them. So our staff and their staff worked closely to put that together. It was because of his Congressman was able to secure, I believe it was like 2.7 million dollars, and so he wanted to have a press conference for that. So that's what we did. The Joint Water Policy Advisory Committee meeting, I was there. So was some of I think Mayor of La Quinta, Mayor of Indio, council members from the Coachella City Council, others, and we spoke about the East Area of Benefit replenishment fund and projected projects, financials, etc. So it went well. On the 31st, I was able to attend the 30th Annual Senior Inspiration Awards. That was, in my opinion, a great event. I think a lot of folks were happy to be there. I think it was an event that hadn't happened at least in the last 2 years. So there was a big attendance. I'm sure some of the other board members have attended these in the past, but there's folks that are recognized from each of the cities, and then I believe two of folks recognized from the unincorporated area of Riverside County here in the Coachella Valley and in the 4th District. So more than the Coachella Valley, it's the 4th District. But it was great, you know, folks that are retired now that have dedicate their retirement to public service by volunteering at the senior centers. Just a lot of different stories, feel good stories. It was a good event. On April 2nd, that was actually, if you could put that down, as April 1st, April 2nd, and April 3rd. The main conference was April 2nd, but there was a reception April 1st, which I did attend, so I actually left April 1st to be in attendance in Salmo, California on April 1st for a reception. I drove there, so it was I didn't realize it was going to be that long of a drive, but it was like at least 5 hours, 6 hours, so it was kind of brutal. And then I came back on April 3rd, the next morning. It was a good conference. It was just that one day. It was a Saturday, but it was packed with council members, school board members from that area, the Central Valley, county supervisors from that area. We had speakers there. We had Betty Yee, the controller, who made some remarks. She spoke. We had Laura Firestone, State Water Resource Control Board member, who also gave a presentation on the Safer Dollars and kind of an update on the different projects that they're working on. There was panels on Sigma and where we're at with Sigma. There was some presentations there by, I believe it was the county of Tulare. They had a pretty good tool that they've been able to put together from some grant funding that they received. So it was a good meeting, a good conference. And then on April 11th, let me see here. I don't recall this April 11th meeting. Let me see. I have a meeting on my calendar. It says call to prepare for April 19th presentation in Sacramento. And let me see. I'm just going to say that meeting here that you have was probably canceled. I don't recall having that meeting, but I do see it in my calendar, but I never accepted it. But I do have one that was a preparation for the And that was a meeting with Carrie and Dan to go over the PowerPoint and the presentation, and then how Dan and I were going to tag team that presentation. So you could add that one instead. And then should I just stop there and then continue later? Yeah, I'm going to stop there.
Sure. So we have, then that gets you to 13th, Colorado River Board, Director Nelson.
Yeah, this meeting was the first all in-person, no Zoom meeting of the Colorado River Board of California. It was held in Ontario on April 13th. We got all of the updates on the hydrology and the executive director's reports. We went into executive session to discuss the letter of the 7 basin states, coordinating back with the secretary's request for such a letter. And we adjourned that meeting with a consensus that the chair would sign the letter and keep the groups updated on any modification. So that's went well, and that was it.
Okay. Let's see, back on.
So yeah, I was, I was nominated to receive an award. Kind of makes me shy.
You brought it, right? You brought it.
Right there,
okay, good.
Yeah, I told him, can you mail it to me? I don't think I could take that on an airplane. so it seems like it got here. So yeah, I was somebody that I've been working with wanted to nominate me. I think they worked with staff to help put together the application and the bio that needed to go with it, and highlight some of the work that we've been involved in at the state level, safer issues around trying to tackle bringing water to folks that don't have access to clean, safe drinking water because they rely on their private system. So yeah, I guess that went well, and they said come on over to the University of Pennsylvania, and so that's where I went. I went to the university. Beautiful campus.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real nice campus. I had never been there. I had been to Philly before, but I never been on the campus. So I took the time to walk around it, and
Cool.
it was one of the old-looking campuses, that you see in the movies, like I imagine Princeton or something like that. But it was nice. It was nice to be there. I took my wife, so my wife was with me. I was able to say a few words. We had done a video about 2 weeks before that, and they played that video. They kind of, before they brought me up there, they read about, they read the bio and went over some of the work that we've been doing, and then they asked me to go up there, and I made some brief comments, and I thanked staff, I thanked the board. I let them know that folks don't do anything by themselves. It takes a team effort, and that's what we've been doing here. And so folks were impressed, and they think we're doing a good job. There was other people from California there, so they said, oh, we know where the Coachella Valley's at, and some folks from Aqua were there. Other folks from nearby water districts. I think there was a young woman that got an award from, I think it's Walnut Water District, somewhere around that area. But it was good to be there, and so I'm happy that I was there to represent the district, and I want to thank staff and the board for all your support.
Good.
Thank you.
A couple meetings from Director Bianca. We'll save those for later. April 14th, I decided not to go to the Desert Valleys Builders Association because that was the same time as the CVEC that IID was holding in La Quina, so I went to that instead, wanting to hear the latest on this proposal to create some sort of a special funding mechanism for the municipalities in the Coachella Valley to speed up the building of substations and try to create a fund. It was interesting. I mean, I think that there's a real need. That was obvious by being there, that, you know, if you're looking to build homes or put in some sort of an improvement, you can't necessarily afford to build your own substation, and so it's been really stopping growth in the eastern Coachella Valley.
We're all in the Coachella Valley.
Yeah. Anyways, that was worthwhile. I was glad I was there. State Water Regional Control Board, Director Estrada.
Yeah, this was fun. You know, we've been preparing for a few weeks now, and anticipating this meeting. I know Dan and Carrie and their team were working for a few weeks trying to put a presentation together for the water board for this meeting. It was a big day. You know, there was a question on whether we wanted to do this over Zoom or whether we wanted to do this in person. I believe this was the first meeting that the water board was conducting in person. They've been doing meetings via Zoom, I think, for maybe the last 2 years or so, but this was, I think my understanding was this was probably one of the first meetings that they were going to do in person. So they gave us the option. They said, you want to do this in Zoom, you want to come in person? And I said to staff, you know, this is a big thing. We should go in person. You know, we're requesting $23.4 million. You know, something significant, something that staff on their own, you know, their own staff is recommending. They're, you know, doing the pitch for us, and I think we should be there in person. So we decided to go in person. Dan put together, Dan and engineering department put together a presentation, a very thorough, well-detailed presentation with a lot of maps and pictures and just a lot of history of all the work that we've been doing. You know, the plan was that we were going to leave on Monday in the evening, and I think he was able to make it. But you know, I left anticipating traffic on Monday, and it took me like an hour and a half to get to Palm Springs, and I was like, I'm not gonna make the flight. So I came back, and you know, there was like few seats left for the next morning, and anyways, I got on the flight next morning at 5 a.m. So I went, I took a nap, and woke up at 2 a.m. to catch the flight at 5 a.m.
No traffic.
No traffic. Boom! I got there like in an hour, and we got there and, you know, met Dan in the lobby of where we were staying and had a quick breakfast and kind of recapped on how we were going to try to tackle this together. And, you know, he did a lot of the heavy lifting. He did the presentation. I just made some opening remarks and closing remarks, but he really kind of, you know, drove the message, explained everything that we're doing as a district. And I think he you know, he made the point to the board. The board had nothing but great comments after the presentation. They you know, said that the district was a model on how to get these projects done. That they haven't seen this type of effort anywhere else in the state. You know, board member Firestone, you know, made some comments, and she said she was getting emotional. Which she was emotional, and she said, you know, she says, you guys give me hope that we can achieve the human right to water policy in the state of California. There's nobody else doing this. They wanted us to go back. They made an invitation for us to go back just so that we can help them understand why it is that we're able to do this here and why perhaps it's not being done in other areas, because they'd like to take a model, if they could put a model together and present it to other communities and say, well, this is what you need to do if you want to get projects done. You know, board member Firestone said that, you know, they could do they could do their part at their level of creating funding, but if no one's accessing that funding, it doesn't mean anything. If no projects are being done from that funding, it doesn't mean anything. They can make all the funding available, and it won't help unless there are agencies like our agency that are kind of, stepping outside their comfort zone, out of the box, and kind of thinking about how to tackle these issues. And so they're certainly there to provide, I think, financial assistance. But it does seem like in order for some of these issues to be resolved, it requires an agency like ours to kind of play a role. And maybe not just our agency, but counties, nonprofits, kind of what we've built here, the task force. And so it seems to be a model that's working. I think that in our presentation, we kind of went over who's part of the task force. We went over what projects we've completed. We talked about the West Side Elementary School, the Thermo Mutual Water Company, the other connection that we did to another mobile home park. How we've been able to complete those projects on time, under budget. Dan highlighted the big Highway 86 transmission main. And so, he did all that to kind of, I think, make the point that the district's a capable agency when it comes to executing big projects. And certainly the project that we've been pitching, the Avenue 66, is a big project. It's a $30+ million project, which we've been able to pretty much secure all the funding for already. We got 23.4 from the state, 7 from the assembly member through his budget appropriation, and then the 2.7 that we've got from the congressman. So I think now it's just a matter of executing the project, and the board didn't hesitate one bit in making the money available. I think, as a matter of fact, there was one of the board members, I think it was Board Member Morgan, who said there was something they put on the resolution about giving the director the authority to increase the dollar amount by 20%. And she said, I don't like the 20%. I'd like it to be whatever percent. Let's just give them the money. So there isn't a cap. I think they did ask, though, that it goes back to that if we have to increase it, it goes back to them, just because I think they want to know what the results are when the bids come in. But Dan did say that we put in there a 10% contingency, so it's already has some cushion. So 20%
20
on
on
top
10.
on 10, that's a big cushion. So, but the board again had nothing but positive things to say about the district, the staff, the board, and I just reminded them that we are equally thankful of their staff, because they've been working with our staff over these years. They've I know that we're talking to them like on a daily basis, weekly basis about these projects, and not just these projects. I think what it really does is creates relationships that it's going to go beyond these efforts. It's not just these efforts, but it's a lot of other efforts that we might need to be able to work with that staff at the board level, and so I think we've been able to create a good relationship. I'm certainly proud of what we've been able to accomplish. I'm proud of staff, proud of this agency, and I think that the state is also proud of us. And I mean, you guys should watch the board meeting if you didn't get to see it, and just it's a long meeting, so just I think Scott was able to figure out where it starts. You provided a breakdown for Janet at the Desert Sun, so maybe just send that out to the rest of the board so that they know where to start, and get to see Dan's presentation, because I think Dan's presentation was, it's a good snapshot. It does a very good job at laying out all the work that we've been doing, and maybe it'd be beneficial. So, anyways, good day, great day. That was a very, very good day for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Costello.
And did you cover the press conference?
No. Oh, and then we just wanted to let folks know what we did on that day on Tuesday. So we had a small press conference with the assembly member to try to just highlight that we were able to put together this funding for the Avenue 66 project, a combination of the 23 million that was approved on last Tuesday, and his 7 million that he was able to secure last year. So we just wanted to let folks know, give them an update on where we were at, with these projects and what it meant for the community. We were able to have some of the folks that would benefit from a direct connection to this pipeline there in the audience, so they were with us on Friday. They're happy. I was joking with them, said that they were famous in Sacramento because Dan ended his presentation last Tuesday by saying that Dan and Mario visited some of these parks in preparation for the meeting, because I think they wanted to get a real in-person feeling of what it was all about. They talked to some of the folks out there, and one of those folks are the folks that came to the press conference. That was Manuela Garcia and Juana Garcia. And so Dan said to the board, I went out there to meet Juana Garcia, and she told me about her experiences that, things aren't right, et cetera, and that Dan said to the lady, I'm gonna be in Sacramento, and we're gonna be asking for some funding so that we can build infrastructure. Is there anything that you'd like me to say to them? And so Dan said, yeah, she said, well, that she said a bunch of stuff, but she said, well, just tell them this, that my life's important. So Dan ended his presentation by saying that Manuela had said that her life was important. So we let her know that she was famous in Sacramento. And she was just laughing, but
That's cool.
Yeah. So anyways, that was the press conference. It was nice. It was I think that both the assembly member and the supervisor had good things to say about the work that we're doing. They're certainly there to be supportive of our efforts, and I believe the supervisor is taking his item maybe today related to the ARPA monies. So he's committed to also make some of the dollars that he's getting from ARPA to put him into infrastructure in the east side or other areas that might need infrastructure. So he made that commitment. I think that that's going to their board today. So a lot of support, a lot of good news. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This whole thing, it's like they want to pilot, or they want to create this project somewhere else, do this in other places. The thing, there's no money, right? I mean, so you figured out the money thing, which is amazing. But when you think about Manuela Garcia, I mean, this issue was raised, why don't I have clean water? This issue was raised a long time ago. The patience that you have to get through this process, and now you have the money, but she still doesn't have the water, right? I mean, how many more years? It's going to be years before she actually can turn the tap on in her house.
Hopefully 2 years.
And get fresh water.
2 years.
2 more years, yeah. So it's, that maybe makes 7 or 8 or however long it's been. But how do you duplicate this somewhere else? You need somebody like you that's going to be the bulldog or the quarterback, make it happen. And you just need a tremendous amount of patience, to see it through.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real team, and I was thinking the same kind of thinking in terms of you need the Costello to quarterback it. You need the legislature to legislators that have the wherewithal to get it through, right? You need the community members to help support that grassroots effort, and you need a water district with the expertise that can prepare, all the projects and get it going. And I mean, I'm seeing across the state a number of these other communities, and they don't have a quarterback. They have the legislators, and they don't have a water district that can come alongside and help, organize all these things and the expertise that the staff has to put it all together.
Yeah, you couldn't do it without without a water district staff team.
Right?
It's too complicated.
I mean, when you have, in some of these communities, when you have one general manager
Yeah.
and one
Five staff.
engineer and a
true.
bookkeeper, right?
Yeah.
It's just, it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, no, it's not. Anyways, very impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's some additional meetings. I have a couple of them. I'll start here. April 20th, I had my Prime Gov training, which I apparently need to do a little more. It's this whole Chrome on an iPad thing. I think there's something wrong there. Anyways, April 21st, we had a meeting. I believe Director Estrada was there also with folks from Cadiz who have some very interesting ideas about how they can work with folks in our valley. That's all I had. Any other additional meetings?
I have a few. I just emailed them to Sylvia so she wouldn't have to take notes. I think I may have reported on this one, I'm not sure, but on April 4th, we had a California caucus Zoom meeting to discuss the California response to Secretary Trujillo's request to comment on the JOA releases and the Lake Powell 2022 releases. Subsequent to that, on April 8th, April 19th, April 20th, April 21st, we had 7 Basin States meetings with the principals, with USBR, Department of Interior, virtual meetings to run the sausage on the coordinated 7 Basin States response. So those were all challenging for sure. And then on April 25th, I had a California Farm Water Coalition meeting. It was in Turlock. I didn't make it, so I attended virtually. We had a strategic planning session based on some interviews that the coalition did across the state with big water agencies that are part of the coalition, like Imperial, Westlands, and we also included in that some urban water districts to see what they might think of the coalition and what we could be doing better to communicate issues, as well as some of the water agencies that have, not many, but there were a couple that have left the support of the California Farm Water Coalition. So finding out what the coalition is doing good and not doing good. We had quite a conversation about a Wall Street Journal ad that the coalition supported and put together, putting in the value of agriculture and in that. And then there was a whole social media response to that too. There was a QR code on the ad. And the ad basically is saying, food shortages are a thing that we're all could be facing, without, water to agriculture. So there was a whole Facebook follow-up with that. And so there were tens of thousands of hits, but there were actually, thousands and thousands of people that were directed to the California Farm Water Coalition site. And it was amazing because they had spent between 4.5 and 5 minutes on the site. So it wasn't like they just clicked, went through, but there was actually some reading done. So it was a very successful endeavor. And there was, for that ad, it wasn't just general money. There were some other entities that chipped in for that. And so it was all covered by other money. So it was quite a good meeting to talk about some of the good efforts that the coalition's doing on behalf of, California agriculture and water use. So that concludes my reports.
Any others? Is it? All right. Is there a motion to approve per diem for the meetings reported on?
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passed 4-0. General manager report.
Yes, sir, the standard stuff. We've got about 250 folks that have had COVID. We currently have 3 folks off work. We had 6 qualifying cases in the month of April. We've got about 86% of our employees that are considered fully vaccinated. On the question about the landscape plans, I am told they were originally submitted for first check on October 8th. They were returned 1 month later on November 8th. Then 3 months later, they were submitted for the second check, and they were returned 1 month later on March 8th. So I guess we'll receive the third submittal around June 8th and return them around July 8th, if that pattern holds. But we're currently waiting on the landscape architect, who apparently is in Baltimore, to return the plans. Must be good if they've gone all the way to Baltimore for them. It's probably just a business partner they've used before, so.
Yeah, who's never done plans in the Coachella Valley?
In a flood zone. That's all I've got, sir.
I hear smoke trees really like it
Really?
near washes and flood
Maybe we
channels.
should let them know.
Good. Council report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As we all know, the governor issued a executive order which directed the state board to come out with regulations by mid-May, by end of May, May 25th, that would require water suppliers to move to level 2, stage 2 of the water conservation plans. We have a number of folks in our firm who monitor that and took part in a state board webinar last week, which was a preliminary workshop to receive information about what those regulations will look like. And just a couple of notes that our team provided to the rest of us is that there were a number of questions from the attendees of that webinar about what if their particular entity had plenty of water where conservation and cutbacks weren't necessary. Would they need to comply? Would there be any opt-out? And for now, the state board staff said no, there would not be any opt-outs. There was a discussion of when they provide, water districts such as ours provide our assessment to the state board in June, the final one due in July. If those come out and show that that there is water supplies which exceed our projected demands, would that provide an opt-out from having to move to level 2? And the answer was no, there would be no opt-out. One of the other questions that was raised was, well, a number of water conservation plans, all of them from these various water districts in California, have various measures that could be selected when you move to level 2, stage 2. And would the state board require that all of those measures currently in somebody's plan for level 2, would they all have to be implemented? And the state board's response to that was no, there is discretion which within each water supplier, when you move to level 2, which measures you feel would be most impactful and which ones you want to implement. So that was a little bit of good news after the no on the opt-out part. So I'm sure we'll certainly keep you up to date as that moves forward in May. The anticipated date for it to go into effect, the regulations, after the state board approves it in May would be June 10th, but everything's in draft form at this point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay.
Jeff, I have a question for you. In the governor's order as well, there was a requirement that all new wells be approved by, not, the normal sequence is you go to a county and you get a state well permit. But under the order, there's now a requirement for well drillers to get a permit from the local GSA before it goes to the county. And so counties are taking the position in a number of other counties, and I don't know about Riverside County, that they won't issue the well permits without that GSA sign off on that. Are we seeing any of those come through, or what's our requirement?
Well, they haven't come through my office. I can check with staff, but they typically go through, Steve, Zoe. So I can check on that for you. But we've got, 5 GSAs out here: Indio, Coachella, CVWD, DWA, Mission Springs.
So depending on the area,
So
right?
depending on the area, I mean, those GSAs would have to weigh in. I don't know, I'm not aware that we would deny a permit right now, just based on the fact that the plan's working. You know, we'd certainly want to know what the anticipated draw would be on an annual basis to figure that into, you know, our water management plans. But for the most part, you know, again, the board's goal is to get people off of groundwater pumping. And so as we look to, you know, the non-potable programs that we've got, you know, that are now essentially moving off of the sanitation fund. You know, in the West Rack, pretty much the only thing we've got there is the Mid-Valley Replenishment Facility, which, you know, is still a pretty significant project. And then in the east, we've got the Oasis project. So unless someone was having problems with an existing well and needed to re-drill, I really don't know that we've seen a lot of action even recently.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree
So-
with that. But there should be a process developed so that
Yes.
we don't, delay
Yes.
people who need that well in a hurry if they're trying to replace a well that has failed. kind of
Understood.
thing. Yeah.
Jeff's comments did remind me that I was also aware recently the state Senate took action to adjust what they felt was the normal indoor water use for folks in the state of California. We use 55 gallons per person per day. Apparently, the average, based on the article I read, was 48 gallons per person per day, and so the Senate is looking to reduce that to 47 gallons per person per day, but it's not for a year or two out. And the House, of course, still, the legislature, the Assembly, still has to take action on that. But if passed, that will cause us to go back in and adjust the model, the methodology we use for calculating domestic rates to
Tier 1, Tier 2.
crank that down a bit. Conservation.
Yeah, it seems to be in conflict with this whole human right to water concept.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know,
Well,
Nobody.
you have a human right, just only up to
Yeah, you-
40.
yeah, you
And I
only
hear
get
it's.
47.
And I hear there's eyes on 44 in the future.
And
But it-
42.
But it's
Yeah.
just gonna, the way our rates are set up, it's just gonna make it harder for people to pay for their water.
Well, nobody's really got a way to measure indoor use only unless they've got, you know, two separate meters, one for outdoor, and we typically don't have that.
See, the
Yeah, take
state's
your call.
calling in right now to tell us that
time for me
you
to-
better do it.
Time for me to
Okay.
rejoin the Lost Boys.
All right, so I hear we might have a departmental report today. Steve Bigley?
Mr. Combs.
Start the timer, Steve, 3 minutes now.
Couldn't develop too much.
We do have a couple of closed session items, but.
So in regards to the provisions for the county to approve well permits, we do look at that as being a land use agency requirement based on the way it's written, both provision 9A and 9B. The state has volunteered the Department of Water Resources to develop a guidance for how the counties would develop a process to approve these wells. The first part is pretty straightforward. GSA would sign off on there being adequate water for the well to be permitted by the county. So that's straightforward. The second provision could require more detailed analysis by the county to determine if drilling that well would have impacts to other well users nearby. I suspect they'll want help doing that, and that's where, you know, we may be impacted in the time from analysis to help out, depending on how much we want to help the county to fulfill that responsibility that they have under this new the governor's executive order. So to be determined. But we have reached out to the state to see what they're doing, and they're scrambling
because of the short time frame of this executive order.
Okay.
Okay, for Chrome 6, so 4.5 years since they withdrew the standard back in 2017.
Time flies.
So they kicked off in December with a public scoping meeting to prepare a draft programmatic EIR, something that they haven't done for a drinking water standard before. They were going to evaluate 17 different MCL options as part of that analysis. The ranges for those MCL, those standards, range from 1 to 25 parts per billion. We shared comments that they should be looking at the environmental impacts of building treatment plants at impacted well sites in communities, look at the waste that is produced, hazardous waste, when you treat water for chromium-6, and the impacts that it has on the environment, and the cost to the communities that are impacted by higher costs that affect their life. So we've heard nothing from them on that process. So I have no update on it. Meanwhile, they have completed a external peer review of the best available technologies. So the conventional technologies, reverse osmosis, ion exchange, reduction, coagulation, filtration, all conventional technologies that we have tested when we developed our project to comply with the previous rule. The external peer reviewers agreed with the state that those are 3 best available technologies to move forward with. And the second request to the peer reviewers was to have them comment on the use of stannous chloride as a best available technology. The state's recommendation is that there isn't enough information yet to put it in as a best available technology. The 3 peer reviewers, one believed there will never be enough information to justify stannous chloride as best available technology. One agreed with the state that with additional information, it may be a viable approach. The third one felt there is enough information for certain water quality conditions for it to be listed as a best available technology. So kind of a split. But that third commenter also said, I understand based on the process, there isn't enough to include it as BAT. For example, you have to have cost provided. One agency that's done the most on stannous chloride is the Coachella Valley Water District. We did a full-scale demo for a water system serving 5,000 people, and it worked great. We didn't develop costs for it. So just that alone would have disqualified it from being a best available technology. Of course, it also has to be demonstrated at multiple water quality types, and one test at one agency is not enough to do it. The best part of the review is the state's response to the commenters that we also believe that under the right water quality conditions, stannous chloride would be a viable technology, and that because it's not a best available technology does not mean that it would not be approved for use. The third thing they've been doing is working on the MCL regulatory package. Instead of coming out with an actual draft rule, they have decided to come out with an administrative draft, which is not within the Administrative Procedures Act. So it basically is a test balloon. So we have looked at that rule. It would set the standard at 10 parts per billion, same number that we had before. It would lower the detection level for reporting from 1 part per billion down to 0.05 part per billion, a 20-fold reduction. Currently, we're not even sure we can achieve that in our laboratory, and we probably do more testing than most public water systems in the state. There are labs that can achieve that. They think they're justified. They just didn't tell us how they justified that number, so we will be commenting on that. It will increase the cost to perform testing, which is not an inexpensive test to start with.
So that's am I right? That's 1/20th?
20-fold reduction in
Yeah.
the detection limit for reporting.
Yeah.
Yep. And it far below what they're even proposing, even in the most stringent. If they set the standard at 1 ppb, this would be well below that. So it's not clear why they feel the need to do that.
Was the public health goal 0.02?
Yes. So the public.
0.05 is not that far off.
Right, and, you know, they're trying to achieve closest to the public health goal as we can.
Right.
So, and then the third part of the rule is compliance periods. They've actually included compliance periods for the first time in one of their rules. And they give large water systems like ourselves 2 years, the medium-sized systems 3 years, and the small systems 4 years. That is wholly inadequate. As you knew, SB 385, the district helped push forward, provided 5 years, and we would have needed the entire 5 years. In fact, all but 2 weeks of it in order to complete the project that we had, a shovel-ready project to build best available technology. So we are working on comments on this rule. The comments are due this Friday. And currently, they're under legal review. BBK's looking at the comments I've prepared, and we will be submitting those. We also worked with Aqua, and their comments have been developed, and they'll be submitted also. Midsummer, we're expecting to get a actual draft regulatory package. So they're going to see what these comments are. I think some of the things we've identified would mean midsummer would probably not happen. I think it's going to take them a little longer to fix this administrative draft. They were planning to finalize it in this fall, and then with the Office of Administrative Law approval occurring in spring of 2023, and then it would become effective for compliance. So one of the key things that we've identified in this rule is compliance costs. They've estimated compliance costs, much like they did before, and they're wholly inadequate. They have way underestimated the costs, and we had a call with some of the state. I know Director Estrada was on that call last Friday. Their costs for the capital costs to comply with the 10 parts per billion for all 189 impacted water systems in the state is $287 million. So for our water system, we have 39 wells impacted at this 10 parts per billion. That's 40% of our wells. 4 of them in the eastern Coachella Valley are already being treated with our ion exchange treatment process that also addresses arsenic. We have 35 wells remaining. So we took our shovel-ready project, competitively bid, guaranteed maximum price in 2016. We escalated that to $2022. We added in the additional wells that are now impacted by the rule that did not exist back in 2016, or were slightly below the level, and now they're slightly above the level, and developed our costs to implement the same ion exchange technology that they have used to estimate the statewide costs, and it results in a $427 million capital cost. So 49% greater than the statewide costs that they developed.
That's crazy.
And so I looked into how that could be, and I think one of the key things that I found, they didn't even include the costs to treat the ion exchange brine that you generate, the waste product in the process. So you have to remove chromium from the water. It puts it in the salt brine. Then you got to remove it from the salt brine. Easy part is removing it from the drinking water. Tough part, removing it from the salt brine. Most complex process and expensive in the whole process. So they just assumed you could put it in the sewer or haul it away. And considering states' unique hazardous waste criteria, unique among all the states, the most stringent that exists, to think that you could dispose of hazardous waste in the sewer is
Ludicrous.
shocking. It's shocking coming from the regulatory agency that comes up with these rules. So, and of course, when you concentrate the chromium, you're also concentrating naturally occurring uranium, so the waste becomes radioactive. You have to get special licenses and.
But we're not talking about doing any of that, right? I
So,
mean,
and
if
that,
you can-
great,
So Steve.
great segue.
Is
Yeah.
the 10 set now, or we're not
No,
worried about it?
no, it's not set, and it's not set, but
23.
Because, I mean, if 10, this is the problem, right? I mean, if they're not able to estimate the economic impact because their numbers are so thoroughly wrong, then the differential between, let's say they go to 5, where we have to do ion exchange, and we're at $400 million, versus 10, which is where it sounds like they're talking about doing 10, where we can do the Stannis, that might cost a lot less, right? 50 million or whatever. I don't know, maybe less. Then how can they possibly weigh the differential impact between those numbers if they don't have a good basic understanding of economics?
agreed. And there's multiple reasons why they missed on that number, and all of them will be in our comment letter.
Yeah.
And so they need to fix their estimates, and I think we have a good basis to help them fix their estimate. They need longer compliance periods. You can't even get through their own CEQA process in the amount of time that they would allow for us. So a lot of work needs to be done on their rule. And what I can do is I can tell you what our plan is now. So let's say they finalize the rule on 10 parts per billion. Stannis works. We've demonstrated it. We have already met with them last month, the Division of Drinking Water staff, and said we want to start the process to amend our permit for our one water system that we demonstrated it, the IDA water system, so that we can move forward with a permit amendment to be able to use stannous chloride as an approved drinking water additive already, that we already demonstrated, to begin collecting data. So we suspect in the summertime, we may be coming back in front of the board to request some costs to begin implementing the IDA chromium-6 reduction project. We think it'll be very important for us to build support and to demonstrate longer term the effectiveness of that treatment process, so that we are prepared for the Cove water system where most of our impacted wells exist. So the state is supportive, the state staff that we talked to, no red flags were raised. They want to see us start collecting data and learning more about this treatment process.
Do you think they'd be willing to fund that?
I didn't ask that, but the costs are not that great for us. We already did it once. Those skids that were on loan have been enhanced. There are now better skids that the manufacturer has produced. The skids that have the injection equipment for the stannous chloride, they now are better, and so we would be needing to purchase those because it's long.
Do they have lobbyists in Sacramento that are pushing this in Seattle?
Not that I know of, no. They've been very quiet, but they've just been waiting to see what the number is, so.
Yeah.
Well, it just needs to be very clear that 10 is one cost, and less than 10 is a much, much, much higher cost.
Yes.
Yeah, and we should be at 50.
Well, you're right. It sounds like we're not going to go above 10.
There were a lot of comments on the health risk of chromium-6, and the state just immediately discounted them, saying that's not our job. So the state, meaning the Division of Drinking Water, is managing the risk. You have a problem with the risk assessment, go to this other branch of the state that does the risk assessments. That's their job.
Okay.
So don't even comment about the risks, because That's not what we do. We're just managing the risk. So it's not really
Steve,
fair.
at the legislative committee meeting that we had, we talked about this briefly.
Yeah.
And talked about the funding question that Jim mentioned, that, wherever it falls, that there should be money that comes along with that mandatory requirement. So I think that's something you want to sort of keep our attention on. Then the other thing, I'm wondering about this. I'd heard, if I made this up in my own head or what, that drinking bottled water, the rates, the parts per billion are either 10 or higher. Is that accurate?
So currently for bottled water, the Food and Drug Administration sets those standards. They're set at the same as for total chromium that we have for our public water system, which is 50 parts per billion. There are bottled waters that exceed 10 parts per billion out there. We know because we've done tests on them. And there's those that are well below that level. Often what you'll see in bottled water is they take tap water, they run it through a reverse osmosis treatment system that removes everything. Then they add some minerals back in and put it in a bottle. So those would have very low or no detectable levels. But spring waters would be coming from mineral deposits that can contain chromium naturally occurring, and you can have levels like what we'd see in our water. So it's a wide range.
So the federal standard is 100, right?
Federal standard's 100 for total chromium.
California's 50, and now
Yep.
it's going to 10 for Chrome 6.
Yeah, and they are likely to propose 10, and that's. I might also mention, one of the key reasons the rule was thrown out, the judge found that it was clear that they didn't show it was economically feasible for these small water systems that would be expected to pay water bills over $600 a month for Chromium 6. So they said, the judge said, how can you say this is economically feasible? Go back and try again. So in this staff report for this administrative draft, they have determined that those small water systems serving less than 100 service connections would install point-of-use treatment devices, treating the water from one faucet, typically under the kitchen counter, and that would cost about $40 a month and be economically feasible. But for water systems over 100 service connections, they put right in their staff report that 16 of those water systems would have costs exceeding 2.5% of the median household income, which is EPA's threshold of affordability.
Say that again, 2.5?
2.5% of the median household income for the community. So basically, right in their staff report, they have said this standard is not economically feasible for at least 16 public water systems, which is, I don't know how a judge would consider that satisfying the court order, but that will also be something in our comments.
So that's something that the city of Coachella is also going to try to double down on is that medium household income, and I know that that's something that we've brought up. CVWD representing the district at the Safer Advisory Group is, they're kind of setting the field for who to provide assistance to. I think for a number of issues, not just Chromium 6. There's points that they give for at risk, potentially at risk, and it has to do with emergent constituents of concern and things like that. And I've been trying to figure out how we could create a notch, like for ourselves at the water district, to be able to qualify for some of that money. But I think it becomes challenging for an agency our size to show that perhaps we wouldn't be able to carry the cost through rate increases, because they try to reserve that money for like folks that really need the help. but I've been trying to figure out, how do we do that? Is there a way for us to I think what hurts us right now, even with the, let's say that it's the 2.5, and we cover an area over the district that is on one spectrum of the pay scale, and then another pay scale, and but folks pay the same rate, right? And so I think I don't know if there's a way for us, and I've been trying to think of this, is for us to account, like for us to say to the state, look, we also provide service to areas that are considered severely disadvantaged, whether they're the areas in Bombay Beach and Salt City and North Shore, wherever they might be. Cathedral City, maybe other areas in Sky Valley, I don't know.
Trial and error.
And say, hey, can we get credit for that? Can we get credit for those populations that we serve to try to get some sort of financial assistance for our projects that are going to serve those communities as well, versus having them just blend, our entire population's median household income, which would probably disqualify us.
So do you know Coachella's median household?
Probably around, I think, about 35,000.
Yeah, so they can't afford 625. I use
Yeah.
30. So.
Yeah, so
Uh-huh.
and then you have other areas that are probably worse, like in North Shore and Mecca, Oasis, Bombay Beach, Salt City, and we serve those areas from a district's perspective. I think it hurts us when they see us as one
Yeah,
district and
absolutely.
they blend.
Well, you have maybe one guy.
One guy that blends everybody, right? So I haven't figured out how to do that. I know that the Assemblymember Garcia is carrying a bill. Victoria, you might be aware of it, which tries to make the point that if you are gonna, set this MCL and it's gonna create funding issues for certain agencies, you need to identify the funding source to help implement those projects. So I'm thinking that we have an opportunity as we continue to work with the Assembly member to try to make that point that, for districts like ours that cover such a huge area, there needs to be a way where we can parse out sections of the communities. Otherwise, if it blends it might cause issues. We might not be able to qualify. So just something to think about.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point.
So here's an interesting bit of news, is that under my report, I'll have one more comment, is that the California Coastal Commission has just recommended that they deny the Poseidon desal plant in
Huntington Beach.
Yeah, Huntington Beach. Yeah, so I guess the drought's not that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't make any comments.
Well, it's so many conflicting, everyone's got conflicting priorities. Ridiculous.
Speaking of
Good. All
Yeah.
right, so I think that gets us to the end of our open session. At this time, the board will recess into closed session to address the items 13A through
Excuse me. I didn't mean to.
something, E. And we will reconvene here after the closed session to do our report out.
At 4 o'clock, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll be there.
I'll be there too.
Yeah, oh, good, glad you'll be there.
And that'll be a good one.
Yeah, I had a thing that, my conflict came and went. Yeah, no, there was a COVID issue, not with me, but somebody else.
Are we ready?
What happened to your
So that
headset?
got canceled.
Did you have your little headset?
I can't use that. They need to find me a new
So,
one.
I believe we're back live.
Regular meeting is hereby reconvened. We do have one item that's reportable from closed session. Jeff, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. On item 13D, the board took action on a motion by Director Aguilar and a second by Director Nelson and a 5-0 vote to authorize the initiation of litigation against General Motors in regard to defective trucks purchased And that was the end of the closed session.
And it's 5-0
Thank-
instead of 4 because we had Director Bianco.
Yes.
join us.
Right, 5.
Thank you for the clarification. And we are, hearing no further business, we are adjourned.